Close flight dive on it.
This is twice now the Celtics have been first to the floor.
Stayed with Horford. Unbelievable.
Boston first to the floor. So good.
Brown fakes, fires up the three. Tatum dives on the floor. Everybody dives. Jaylen Brown with the block. Blocked by Porzingis. He's doing it all. Tatum spinning, driving, layup. Washington drives. Blocked by White. Oh, what a block from Derek White.
Welcome into another episode of First to the Floor. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Tonight, the Luke Kornet deep dive. That's right, the one you've all been waiting for, the Cornish game hen. Alongside me, as always, is Jake Eisenberg, who, by the way, is now officially writing full-time for Celtics blog. Congrats, Jake, and honestly, a great get for Celtics blog.
Yeah, I think this is a mutually beneficial signing. Hopefully this works out similar to the Xavier Tillman pickup. As last year, I can help the
High
Celtics.
upside.
Exactly, high upside. Good advanced metrics guy, a little under the radar. But yeah, the prompt that they had us write as like a test, I guess a tester, was Derek White has just been traded to the Detroit Pistons for Jaden Ivey and Tim Hardaway Jr. And it was one of the most painful experiences in my life.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. It was, but it was at the same time kind of specifically designed just for me because it would be very emotional.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll get a chance to read that. Maybe we can put it behind a paywall or something and put it out for the people to read. All right, look, it's a great time to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're only 3 weeks away from Celtics Media Day, which is insane. And I don't know about you, Jake, but
Let's go.
I miss our guys. I'm ready for Media Day in 3 weeks' time.
We are under a month away before the Boston Celtics will be playing basketball against the Denver Nuggets.
Crazy.
So it's coming. It's coming. A few weeks to go, which is so exciting.
We could do an early segment of Ben's anxiety corner where I tell you I'm
Yeah,
afraid that the
true.
guys haven't had enough rest.
I know. Despite Jason Tatum playing a total of like 7 minutes in the Olympics, was it too many? Is he not going to be refreshed?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good shout out to the chat. We got a few. Derek hasn't been here in a while. Good to see you. Ben, Jimmy, we got a crew. Phil in the chat. Brian. Quick question from Derek. Better defensive backcourt, Marcus and Avery or Drew and D. White?
It's Drew and D. White.
It's Drew and D. White. Avery Bradley was, I don't want to slander him, slightly overrated as a defender because he was so good on ball, but not the off ball type of player that Drew and Derek can just destroy other teams' offense in a variety of ways. But this is a good problem to have.
Well, and at some point, talking about a defensive backcourt, you do have to ask, well, what are they going to give you offensively? And that's where Drew and Derek obviously shine through as well. I know that probably escapes the scope of the question.
Offense and defense are connected. Ask Joe Mazzulla.
Got to put that orange ball in the circle thing, right?
That's right.
That's what we always talk about on the show.
All
right. The Luke Kornet deep dive is coming up in just a sec. But first, we haven't had a chance to talk about our guy, Brad Stevens' latest sorcery maneuver. Lonnie Walker IV has signed with the Boston Celtics on an Exhibit 10 contract, which is a 1-year deal worth the minimum, but it's not guaranteed. So it's essentially like a training camp invite. And Exhibit 10s usually come with a bonus, which can be anything between $5,000 and $75,000. Jake, just your initial thoughts and reaction to the Lonnie signing?
He's done it again.
I know, man.
Done it again. Our last deep dive was on Xavier Tillman, and we kind of ended up being like classic Moneyball shit from Brad on Tillman, getting him on the 2-year minimum. So I'm trying to pass it, right? So Celtics fans got very excited about this one. And I'm like, do we get very excited about everything? Or is this like an outlier? And both are true. We get very excited about pretty much everything, especially on this podcast. But one, we have a right to be excited and a reason to be excited about everything because everything that Brad touches turns to gold. That's just what happens. But this reminds me of the reaction to the Xavier Tillman signing more than like the reaction to the Svi Mykhailiuk signing. When we signed Svi, I was like, oh, I kind of see it. You know, Sam Hauser insurance, not as good of a defender, but I kind of like it as an end of bench guy. The way that we reacted to the Xavier Tillman signing was like, oh my God, I think Brad may have just signed like the future Horford guy, et cetera, et cetera. And like that's kind of played out similarly to how we kind of expected. Maybe not quite as many minutes as we thought, but this Lonnie Walker signing reminds me way more of that signing. Maybe not quite to the same extent, but you can kind of see certain things that get you excited about the upside of this move.
Yeah, high upside, low risk with, like we said, not a guaranteed deal beyond training camp. And there's a lot of upside to potentially get giddy about with Lonnie Walker. And like to your point, Jack, have you ever been to like a really high quality restaurant where you go in and you don't even order off the menu? They're just like, the chef will like cook what he sees fit for this day based on the seasonal meats and fruits and vegetables available. And he's going to concoct something amazing and delicious for you. That's what it's like with these Brad Stevens acquisitions. It's like, it doesn't matter what we're thinking. We know that he's going to make the right decisions and serve up the best available things on the platter, which I tend to believe he's done again here with Lonnie Walker. And just the fact that it could go as poorly as possible there at training camp, and you can just cut him and he can go and play elsewhere, and we can dust our hands of that. He does have, I would say, a longer list of weaknesses than strengths, but the strengths are, the obvious ones: the athleticism, the scoring ability. He can score in a variety of ways. He averaged 62% at the rim the last few years, which is not so bad for a guy his size, 6'4", I believe. He's got that mid-range pull-up. He shot 45% on corner threes last year. He's only 25 years old, so we go back to that high upside where he's got this like pretty dynamic offensive skill set. We'll get to the defense in a little bit, but would you pepper any other strengths onto that list, Jake?
I would really enjoy going to a Brad Stevens degustation Michelin star restaurant.
Yes.
That sounds delightful. Here's a little Al Horford for the amuse-bouche. A little Derek White entree.
Yes.
A little Supermax Jay's signing for the main course, and a little Drew Holiday for dessert. Does sound delectable, I must say. So definitely a dimensions guy. So 6'4", 6'8" wingspan, which is pretty absurd. 40-inch vertical, which was very high in his draft class. Now, a 3.06 three-quarter sprint, which is third in the draft class, which is, I'm guessing, the sprint three-quarters of the court race, which I didn't even really know that they did until I found the draft combine tab in NBA stats for the first time, which was fun to go through. So that sounds like he's super athletic. He was third behind Josh Okogie and Zaire Williams. But then at the same time, Kevin Huerter was sixth in this event. So I don't know what to make of the three-quarter sprint. Probably just made me, and I realized that Kevin Huerter had a 38-inch vertical leap. He's just like so much more athletic in a testing environment than he is
That's crazy.
when actually trying to guard defensively. So real dimensions, hyper athlete. Like he clearly has like the measurables. Like I went back and looked at some of his draft stuff. It's like great size, great athleticism, great scoring punch. Can be like, if the shooting stabilizes, he should be a really good player in the NBA, really good role player. Mm-hmm. And that has kind of been the case. Like he's kind of ticked some of those boxes, but he hasn't quite stuck yet.
Yeah, that's what I've got as his top weakness, is just his inconsistency. He's had times where like he's absolutely exploded as a scorer. We saw that in the playoffs with the Lakers a year and a half ago or a couple of years ago. He's exploded as a scorer and an overall threat offensively, but he's had some shockers as well, like sort of more often than not in terms of comparisons to those explosive nights as well. So, hence he's found himself on a training camp deal rather than more of a long-term guaranteed deal elsewhere. But just rewind a little bit, slightly deeper dive on the strengths. I dove into Synergy here. For what it's worth, which is probably nothing, Jake, Synergy rates him highly from a points per possession perspective playing against zone defenses, which we know some of our more notable opponents throw at us, although maybe not anymore given how much we dominated zone defenses last year. Also last year on 210 possessions, so a good sample size, 68th percentile on spot-up shooting opportunities, which I think is like his strength of strengths. He's good for 60% true shooting percentage on spot-up opportunities. And playing with this, hotbed of talent in the Celtics, if he does make it beyond training camp, like he's going to get some wide-open opportunities there.
Here's the thing, right? Like, we know the role that he needs to play on this Celtics team is he would be playing essentially a Pritchard-type role where he's not going to be doing a ton of ball handling. He's going to be spotting up, catch and shoot, attacking closeouts. And in this offense, you can really see how he could be incredibly effective. So I deep dove the shooting numbers. So last season he was 38.4% on 4.7 attempts in 17 minutes. So per 36, that's 9.6 3-point attempts per 36. So very high volume 3-point attempts, which I've kind of learned through following some draft people that's one of the real indicators on shooting ability is like willingness to get the shots up, not just percentage, not just free throw. Like that's a really nice indicator. So over the last 4 seasons, he's at 35% from 3. He had one season in 2021 where he was 31%. So if you remove that season, obviously we're doing him some favors there, but he's at 37% minus the 21/2022 season. Okay. Last 4 seasons combined, though, 38% from the corners. Last 4 seasons combined on catch and shoot threes, 36.9%. Here's where he really struggles. Last 4 years combined, he's at 30.8% on pull-up threes. So you take out the pull-up threes, which is not going to be something that we want him to do in this offense, and he's an excellent shooter. Yeah. Well, a really good shooter, a really capable shooter. A shooter that people have to defend and close out on. And then you look at the spacing on a team like this, something that Pritchard can't do probably to the level that Lonnie Walker can, is attack these closeouts violently in a lineup that's spaced out, whether it's Horford or Porzingis, and the ball gets moving. You can really envision him attacking some closeouts and like throwing down some like insane dunks you see on the highlight reel.
Would love to see it. You mentioned Pritchard, which I think is an interesting talking point from the perspective of if he does make it beyond training camp, Lonnie Walker, where do his minutes come from? Like, can Peyton Pritchard relax? Is there any risk of Lonnie Walker, at least competing for some of Pritchard's rotation minutes there?
I think there is probably a little bit. Like,
I don't know.
If all the ranges of outcomes, there is probably a world where like we got to see him buy in. We haven't even talked about the defense yet. Like, yeah, we know what Missoula, like he likes the guys that he can trust. We're going to talk about Luke Kornet. That's like the epitome of kind of how Joe Missoula looks at coaching, especially in the regular season. You got to earn it. You got to prove you can do it on both ends. We talked about it at the top and how offense helps your defense. Defense helps your offense as well. Are you getting stops? Are you getting out in transition? Is Lonnie Walker going to be a cone?
Cone Lord?
Cone Lord. I'm not sure if he's quite the cone Lord as Jack Robinson, but can Lonnie Walker play some of the best defense of his career in this context? That's what we're hoping, right? I think the Celtics organization should feel confident that they can develop defense at this point. Luke Kornet, Sam Hauser, Peyton Pritchard. Is Lonnie Walker going to be the next guy that has come in with defensive concerns that they can kind of turn the other way? Svi Mykhailiuk, not someone that are able to fix. But is that a tools problem? Like Lonnie Walker, in theory, has the tools to at least be competent. Can you at least fight defensively and be competent? I would think that he has the tools to at least be, net neutral defensively. Yeah,
dimensionally, you said it. He's the GOAT in his weight class in terms of current NBA players. But I think, a notable lack of defensive awareness, like sort of doing some research around Lonnie on, opposing team blogs and subreddits and things like that. A lack of defensive awareness was a common theme. Synergy rates him really poorly as a pick and roll defender, unsurprisingly. 5th percentile overall last year. Teams just score with a ridiculously high efficiency if Lonnie is defending any pick and roll action. And I'm just bringing up synergy now for Pritchard as far as his like defensive pick and rolls. And obviously it's not great, but it's much better in terms of limiting team scoring efficiency when Pritchard is on the court. So for points per possession ranking, it's 49th percentile. Okay. For Lonnie, it was the 5th percentile. So
that was last season.
Difference there. Last season, yes.
I'm doing some work for Lonnie here, obviously, but like how much of that is Kristaps Porzingis, Celtics around him,
Well, and you touched on it as well, just the fact that Pritchard's like been in the quote-unquote program his entire career. There's a lot more continuity there. There's, I would imagine, like consistency and perhaps a higher quality of like defensive coaching and acumen and standard as well as the Celtics, playing for the Celtics. So and this is where we start to speculate and be hopeful as the fans that we are. Like, can Lonnie come into this like tip-top championship pedigree program and play up to that level and find himself a spot in the rotation? Would you prefer like whatever version of Lonnie Walker we know now over the version we knew of O'Shea Brissett? Like, say he just takes the O'Shea spot, and rather than a guy who comes in and adds dynamically in terms of like switchable defense and like crazy crashing of the offensive rebounds and things like that, we get the Lonnie skill set in a replacement of that. Would you prefer the Lonnie side of things to the O'Shea side of things?
I like this version of the Flyer more than the O'Shea Brissett version. I think when O'Shea came in, we were pretty confident that O'Shea Brissett putting the orange ball in the basket was going to be like something that he struggled with, because that's what he struggled with. He was 27. Lonnie's a little bit younger here. I think when you think about the playoffs and upside, it's like we need guys that can be two-way players, right? And Lonnie, I think we're hoping can be more of a two-way player. And right now, that's not the case at all. But I think defense is probably easier for someone to improve at than a 27-year-old learning how to be a scorer and a shooter in the playoffs. Like, we know at least in the playoffs, people are going to guard Lonnie Walker from the three-point line. Defensively, can he just, can he hold up on the other end? So I like the idea of choosing someone that a little bit younger, a little bit of developmental upside that could maybe turn into a just competent enough two-way guy that you can throw out there in the first or second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think I agree. If we can get Lonnie a nice high-quality DSLR camera, get his YouTube channel fired up, get him on the vlogosphere, then I'll be really on board with the Lonnie over O'Shea side of things. But yeah, in terms of a skill set, and we're going back to what we began with, just the higher upside, and add to that the low risk of the limitations of this Exhibit 10 contract, I feel good about where we're at, where Brad's just like cautiously dipping his toes in the Lonnie pool, and we'll see what we can get out of that in terms of how he excels or doesn't in this Celtics environment over camp, and then go from there. Anything else on Lonnie before we get to the Kornet deep dive?
I guess it's like there's a reason he's bounced around, Like, it's one of those things where some smart people on Twitter, Jackson Frank, Ben Pfeiffer, who we had on the pod for the draft show, there was some, brighter basketball minds than mine that were like, that's a really nice signing. NBA University was like, why does the NBA continue to let Brad Stevens acquire good players for no reason? Like, could the Nuggets not have signed Lonnie Walker when they need an injection of like talent? And the Sixers' backup point guard is Kyle Lowry. But the point is, there's a reason that he's bounced around. So we don't know for sure the reason why we're not in these team contexts. But there may be something that we're not 100% sure of is the reason why he's not sticking to these teams. So can he reunion with his best buddy, Derek White, from the Spurs day, who was, I know, saw you posted, Lonnie was at Derek White's wedding back in the day. That would be an awesome arc for Derek White, coming in as like the guy who needs the confidence, instilled with him with the Jays or Missoula. And then now it's Derek White taking his old Spurs teammate who's bounced around under his wing. The tutelage takes him to the school of Derek White, and we get a third ridiculous guard in the backcourt. That's the dream. That's the universe I'm hoping that pans out here.
I got to put myself on the waiting list for the school of Derek White. Yeah, I was concerned like slightly about maybe some chemistry affecting issues where you bring in a guy like Lonnie Walker, where like it does beg the question, why hasn't he stuck anywhere? And you start to wonder, if there are any sort of personality aspects to that. Who knows? I have no idea, but it does beg that question, I suppose. But again, going back to like the continuity of our team, the championship pedigree, I just think that they're such a tight unit. I don't think that's going to be necessarily like penetrated by one guy. So I've talked myself out of concerns there.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we have a point. Like, why did the league let us trade for Derek White? Why did the league let us trade for Drew Holiday? Why did the league let us trade for Xavier Tillman and then re-sign him to a 2-year guaranteed deal when the Knicks like need someone like Xavier Tillman as their backup big man? Like, all these things that keep happening to the Celtics, I'm like, someone should probably stop us at some point from doing all of these things that seem like pretty obviously good moves. Like, you'd think at some point someone would be like, no, I'm going to pay 12% more than the Celtics are on this player, and it's going to work out great for us. But I hope no one figures it out.
Yeah, well, until they do that, we're going to keep gunning for this repeat going into next season.
That's
Now,
right.
look, we're going to take a quick break and be back in a moment for the Luke Kornet deep dive. But first, here's a quick word from our friends over at Game
It's
Time.
finally football season. The West Virginia Mountaineers kick off the season against number 8 Penn State in Morgantown. I'll be using Game Time to easily find incredible deals on great tickets in Milan Puskar Stadium to catch the Mounties, hopefully upset the Nittany Lions. When you jump on Game Time, it's got the stadium right in front of you. It's really easy to find awesome seats. You can get amazing deals like the aptly named Super Deal, which can save money and get you a great spot in the stadium. It's also got concert tickets and tickets to a bunch of other shows, so definitely check that out. Personally, I love the all-in pricing, which you toggle on and Game Time shows you the full price up front, no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets or sports tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Shout out to Game Time. Shout out to the CLNS Network for presenting the First to the Floor YouTube show and audio podcast. If you're listening on the audio podcast, please head over to YouTube and subscribe. If you're watching here on YouTube, please head over to the audio show. Show it some love. Leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps with the algorithm and putting our show in front of new potential listeners. So we'd really appreciate that. And shout out to Game Time. Use that code CLNS and get that deal, that discount on your first purchase. It's one of the better ticket buying platforms out there. We used it for our Summer League tickets while we were over there recently. We do have a video coming out about our Summer League experience next week, which we're excited to share with everybody. But Jake, why don't you kick us off here with our Luke Kornet deep dive?
Luke Kornet, what a guy. What a player. I think Luke Kornet, there's two conversations with Luke. It's Luke, the player, and then there's Luke, the man, the guy, the bus one leader. And was like starting with like Luke as a player, he kind of is the definition of a regular season innings eater. So regular season, Luke played 983 minutes. The Celtics had a net rating of 11.73, which is insane. Luke Kornet off the court, 2,983 minutes. The Celtics had a net rating of 11.22. So the Celtics were actually better with Luke Kornet on the court than off the court in the regular season. Now the playoffs, Luke Kornet on the court, 133 minutes, net rating of negative 7.06. Luke Kornet off the court, 784 minutes, 11.22. Which is like weirdly uncanny, the fact that I wonder if I've typed that incorrectly. Regardless, there was a big gap between Luke Kornet's net rating impact, regular season versus playoffs, and I think we all know that. And but that's why he's like the perfect guy for this role. I'm torn because as the player, I do think that like we could really plug a lot of guys into the Luke Kornet role, and those numbers would probably be the same. And something that I've talked about on this podcast before is like the job of role players on this Boston Celtics team are easy. Like we don't need you to do too much. Just play within your role and play solid. And there's so much talent on this team that can make up for deficiencies, especially in the regular season, that like as long as you can help us maintain that level of play, which is what he was able to do on both ends, both defense and offense. He's able to keep the machine moving. That's all we really need of a 3rd/4th center, or maybe starting center at some point.
Yeah,
next season.
Regular season, like he will be playing a bigger role, right? With KP out until at least Christmas, with Horford not playing back-to-backs. I guess my first question on Kornet to you, Jake, is like, will he be that primary starting big in those Sega second games of a back-to-back in place of someone like Xavier Tillman, for example?
Yeah, I think a lot of us want it to be Xavier Tillman. Like we want Xavier Tillman to be like the depth chart to be KP, Horford, Tillman, because I think we're really excited by what Tillman can give us. But from the Tillman deep dive, I do think that Tillman's value is really going to shine more in the playoffs than it is in the regular season. And it's hard to say. I wonder if they're going to do it matchup based. Like if there's going to be a team where it's going to make more sense to switch everything, like then you go with Tillman starting. But when Horford's not playing, I'm not sure it really matters too much. Like you're going to see a rotation of Kornet, Tillman, Cater. Like if there's 48 minutes, you're probably going to see 18 to 20 of Kornet and Tillman, and then you're going to see 8 to 12 minutes of Cater potentially. Like I'm not sure I see them splitting like exactly 24-24, and Joe's going to try and like kind of, see what sticks.
Yeah, Joe's this crazy basketball technician. So on one hand, I can see him like splitting Kornet and Tillman based on matchup. Like if we need to switch 1 through 5, we'll start Tillman. If we are better off playing in drop or drop defense is more sustainable, then we'll start with Kornet. And like Joe is kind of crazy enough to take that approach, but also I think because of his basketball acumen, he might value continuity and just pick a primary starter as well. And if he is going to make that choice, I would guess that it's going to be Luke Kornet. And like you mentioned, the on-off number disparity between regular season and the playoffs. And really the focus here needs to be the regular season because playoffs, it's a different story. And that disparity speaks to the specificity of opposing teams' game plans, right? Where it's like, we know that Luke Kornet plays his role really well. And I've got some synergy numbers, which are like Luke Kornet fan porn. They're just so sexy as numbers as far as pointing out his strengths, but he does play in a very narrow, very specific lane. And in the playoffs, teams are going to pull him out of that role and force him to do things that he's uncomfortable with, like switch and defend smaller guards, hence the disparity in those on-off numbers. But in terms of his strengths, and this actually carries over to the playoffs as well. So these are the synergy numbers from last year's regular season and last year's playoffs. Rates Kornet really highly on offense. Overall, 99th percentile points per possession rating across the regular season and the playoffs combined. And that tracks over on cleaning the glass as well. Just under 1.5 points per shot attempt. 98th percentile, which is crazy good. And I think indicative, Jake, of like how good a play finisher he is. He's really solid in that dump-off position or as a dump-off option, and he's really improved his hands over time. He wasn't always cool-hand Luke. He went through like a Butterfingers phase, but now he's just solid really around the rim in general. And looking at the play type data, again, continuing through synergy, really solid as the roll man, 98th percentile across 58 possessions, which is a decent chunk of sample size for a backup big man. 85% true shooting as the roll man. Again, solid play finisher. He's also been really efficient in transition as the big guy coming down the middle, 98th percentile in terms of points possession, good for 85.2 true shooting possession. And then finally, putbacks, 78 total possessions, 80th percentile in points per possession. His shot diet is super limited, which I think is fine. And I think it sort of speaks to why he's so efficient, because he just knows what he's good at. Anything around the rim, including putbacks, and he just sticks with that. And as long as teams don't try and take him out of that, which again in the playoffs they can and they will, as long as he stays in his regular season lane, he's incredibly efficient. It's awesome.
There's a lot going on here, man. Like the Luke Kornet porn, the big man coming down the middle here. I'm not sure what actually is more embarrassing. Is it being caught pulling up Luke Kornet synergy numbers, or is it the other thing? Both equally is disgusting for different reasons.
You don't like big man coming down the middle?
We're all on the same team here. He was like insanely efficient last year. I mean, just straight up 70% from the field, 100% from three, 91% from the free throw line. Like, he had a overall true shooting percentage of 73.6, which was a career high. And the year before that was his next career high. So part of this is he has cut out the 3-point shots. And I do want to ask you about the 3-point shots for next season as well. But he just has done such a good job playing within himself, being so efficient. He had a lot of like really good games last year, and a lot of them came with guys out, and he like stepped up. So you can filter by game score on Basketball Reference, which is like a good way to filter by like just total box score impact. They beat the Raptors with a bunch of guys out, 20 points, 9 for 11 from the field, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks. Washington, bunch of guys out again, 11 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocks, like 4 for 5 from the field, 3 for 3 from the line. And you look at like his top game score numbers, it's like Toronto, Washington, Utah, Charlotte, Orlando, Brooklyn, like Washington, Spurs, Chicago. They used him in spots where they didn't really need Porzingis or Al, and he's able to, again, with the talent around him, play his role really well and keep this machine playing at a really, really high level. He leveled up absolutely as a role player. I beginning of the season, I was like, please, Luke, you have to get more than one rebound. And by the end of the season, he's got a very normal rebounding percentage now. So for the season, total rebound percentage 12.9%. A couple notable guys around him. Chet was at 13.2. Kat was at 13.1. Miles Turner 12.8. Mo Wagner, heralded as one of the best backup big man in the NBA, 12.8. Draymond 12.7. Reminded me that Jaren Jackson's an awful rebounder at 8.3%. Brook Lopez down at 8.1 as well. So, again, just another example of just Luke Kornet doing his job. And we don't need him to be an elite rebounder. We need him to be a capable 7-foot rebounder. We need him to be good enough where rebounding is just not an issue when he's out there. And he got to a point where that was the case, where I don't think it was. And he really improved in that area. So that was like one of the more glaring ones. But my favorite thing that Luke Kornet does on offense, despite being a guy that doesn't shoot, we always talk about how we want our big men to shoot, but he kept the offense playing at the exact same level when he was on the court, and a lot of that had to do with his willingness as a passer and a screener. As soon as he touches the ball, he's looking to do a handoff, set a screen, roll. Doesn't work, he sprints out to the perimeter, hits another screen. He's always looking to impact the game any way that he can, and that was one of my favorite things, and I thought that was the biggest difference between him and Cater, was just those really quick decisions to get the ball moving in the offense is just really valuable, and he was really good at it all season long.
Yeah, he's a really dynamic, modern big man who, we'll get to the lack of the three in a second, which we know is there, buried somewhere within him. He's just unallowed or not allowed to use it. But yeah, he'll run a handoff. He'll dive to the basket if there's nothing there. He'll duck back out to the perimeter, set another screen. He's always very active, despite his sort of textbook lack of contribution to quote unquote spacing. But maybe that transitions well to the question I think's on everyone's lips, which is what's going on with the three ball? He shot, I believe, 100% from three on extremely small sample size, one total 3-point shot. I guess didn't want to put any more up and skew his stats any further, Jake. But we know the talent was there. It was sort of a marked aspect of his game when he arrived in Boston, and it's sort of been further and further diminished over his tenure as a Celtic. Why do you think that is? And do you think, with the way the Celtics like to play basketball and the fact that we'll be missing some of our premier big men throughout the season, do you think that's something that we need to reopen with Luke?
Yeah, well, so he came into the league, and his first 2 seasons, he was shooting 4 threes a game in 17 minutes. So that's a high clip here. So per 36, at 8.8 threes per game, and he was knocking them down at 36%. That's very valuable as a big man. The problem is they stopped going in kind of after that. Dropped down to 28.7% the next year, 25% the year after that. And then he got to Boston, and he essentially kind of stopped shooting them after a year or so there. And I'm torn because he just had the best season of his career, pretty easily. And it involved shooting 1 3. So it's hard to be he should change his approach. I do think that the calculus changes for the Celtics now that they have the title. I think you needed to be so militarized with your approach last year to make sure you got to the championship. But I think that injecting some fresh ideas and development into the team that could be a good thing. Just Luke Kornet hitting threes is good for the vibes. Yeah. And so if he starts shooting them again, even if he's hitting them at Daniel Tice level at 32, 33%, he's shooting 2 a game in the 15 minutes a game or 20 minutes a game potentially with KP out. I don't know. I kind of want to see it because what if he Aaron Baines is this thing and all of a sudden then we'll never see him again on the Celtics. But if his last year as a Boston Celtics, Brad Stevens and the boys teach another big man how to shoot late into their career, I think it would be a lovely feather in the cap.
Yeah, I'm super open to it. It does come with risks, and you just kind of touched on this, we're kind of walking the line between strengths and weaknesses for Luke, because the weakness side of it could be he lacks this sort of offensive dynamicism, which at his price point, which is a vet min, not a concern at all. But he basically does 2, maybe 3 things really well. And the reason he grades out with such high efficiency across all stat websites is because he just sticks to those 2 or 3 things and just fucking owns them. But does that lack of dynamicism over time, where he is getting more minutes, maybe he is more part of a, what did I call it? A chapter in the scouting report, or more of a focal point in a scouting report? Can teams use that against him, where it's we're just going to shut down what you do around the rim, and we know that you're not going to take it outside of the rim at all or operate anywhere else, and therefore we can kind of mitigate your impact across the team on both ends of the floor. So for that reason, with more attention on the Celtics having just won a title, does he need to look at potentially expanding his game there? And then you add to that, well, the 3 is there somewhere, like we said, so that seems like the most obvious point, towards which to expand.
It would be awesome. It would just be awesome if he gets the 3 ball back. But yeah, I think we're going to see a similar thing to last year. I listed off some of his best games, and a lot of them came against, worst teams in the NBA. And I think that probably, if I was to go through and look at it more, some of his lower game scores are probably against better teams in the NBA.
Sure.
I think that's kind of the reality. It's his weaknesses are going to pop up more against teams that are better and have more ways to attack him on both ends. And that's okay. He kind of reminds me of the veterans minimum version of Isaiah Hartenstein. Okay. Hartenstein's getting paid $29 million, but he's really good passer, can do some things offensively. Modern big with soft hands skill. Again, veterans minimum version of the guy making $29 million. Don't want anyone to misconstrue the fact that I'm comparing the two, but there's a reason that Hartenstein's making $27 million more, but it's can you get a guy that's valuable enough on both ends and can play in kind of different lineups?
Yeah, the vet min player is a really fun basis for these player deep dives, because it both diminishes the weaknesses, because you're of course he's going to have weaknesses. He's a vet min, but then it makes all the strengths really exciting, because you're despite his low salary, we look at all these things he's fucking awesome at, which we just went through a long list, and that bears out in all those stat pages as well. But I don't know, maybe this is a good time to transition to some of the more glaring weaknesses. And I think, to me, put simply, if you're an opposing team, and especially in the playoffs, if you need a bucket, just call up Luke to the screen. Either he's going to play in drop, and there's a long list of dynamic guards in the league who can exploit drop coverage, or, which would be even worse news for the Celtics, he's going to switch, and that it's pretty bad news, as we've seen from there onwards. So the fact that he presents a guaranteed high percentage look for the opposition in certain types of basketball, particularly playoff basketball, I think is a pretty glaring weakness. We've talked about how you can operate around that in the regular season, and fortunately we've got the depth. We can just bring in Xavier Tillman if teams are going to attack us that way, and it's not a problem. It's a moot point. But I would say that's the biggest weakness, Jake.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we saw it in the Cleveland series, right? KP goes down in the Heat series, and we don't really need Kornet. Kornet plays 18 minutes in Game 5 of the Heat game, but that game was kind of a blowout from the get-go. And I remember going into the Cleveland series and thinking that you might be able to get away with Luke Kornet at least early in the series, because you're going to play drop with Al Horford potentially at times. Can Luke Kornet just protect the rim a little bit, force them into some tougher shots? And Game 1 of that series, the Celtics won by 25. Luke Kornet played 21 minutes, but then as you said, his chapter in the scouting report maybe got moved up a little bit, because they were I think there's a way we can exploit this, and it became very evident that as soon as Luke Kornet was out there going forward, it was lunchtime for Donovan Mitchell. So
it was chapter 3.
Yeah,
chapter
as
3.
Opposed,
what are you going to do about Luke Kornet?
As opposed to before the series, Donovan Mitchell probably didn't read that chapter, if we're being honest. He was I'm just going to cliff notes that one, and then we'll go from there. But so yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. The weaknesses are gonna pop up. Draw him up, especially when you've got elite ball handlers. If you're especially those quick, shifty guards, which are issues for some of the best big men in the league as well. It's just the Celtics are spoiled, and we're spoiled as fans to have multiple guys who can kind of handle guys like that. But yeah, that's definitely one of his weaknesses.
Yeah, and I mean, there's other weaknesses that are just kind of factors among what we've already talked about, like the sort of slow-footedness, which is generally typical of a guy his size. You know, that just factors into some of the things we've already talked about, like the lack of, you know, lateral movement when defending pick-and-roll ball handlers and things like that. Are there any other notable weaknesses that you would add?
Like, I guess offensively, you're right. The veterans minimum thing is hard because, like, yeah, weakness in offense, he doesn't really have anything right now outside of like around the rim, but that's kind of a strength at the same time because he, you know, just decided to not take any shots that were really out away from the rim, and that's why his field goal percentage and true shooting and efficiency was a career high again. But like the ability to hit Kornet on the short roll and him hit a floater, just to like as opposed to just being a straight lob, would just make it more difficult for the Celtics to be defended. And he doesn't have that in his game. He doesn't use that part of his game at all. Doesn't have the pick and pop element right now. So he's just very limited in how he's able to help the Celtics put the orange ball in the basket.
Yeah, and again, that disclaimer of vet min contract, it's like it's hard to hate too much. But folks in the chat, let us know the things you like and least like about Luke Kornet the most. We're going to be back in a moment and talk about some off-court stuff. But first, here's a word from our friends over at Factor Meals.
So about a year ago, a big cold box was delivered to my front door. It turns out my wife had decided to order Factor. It was one of the best decisions she's made. The first meal I had was like this chili mac and cheese, and I've been hooked ever since. It's absolutely delicious. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? Treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Keep kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, which is not my selection, but some people do enjoy that, or simply eat well balanced. Head to factormeals.com/floor50 and use code FLOOR50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code FLOOR50, floor50 at factormeals.com/floor50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active.
Shout out Factor Meals and shout out our own code, FLOOR50, which, as you just heard, you can use to get 50% off your first box, 20% off your next month's box as well, which is a legitimately good deal. I'm all for healthy eating. Jake and I were talking before we went live. We both had a big weekend, and then we're now fully on the healthy eating train, so Factor Meals are definitely a factor there.
Yeah, we feel kind of like what I imagine Al Horford felt like after Game 5 of the Cavs series. Look, can we turn back the clock and do some things that we used to do before we hit 30? Yes. But there is a cost, and healthy eating, we got to get back on it.
Yeah, exponentially increasing cost, unfortunately. We've got some comments flowing in the chat here. Ben in the chat saying, elite from the stripe, ice in his veins. I just looked this up during our break there. 90.7% from the free throw line. I had no idea it was that high. That's crazy.
He's 80+% for his entire career. So like I do think that he probably still can shoot, to go back to that. But like that's my favorite moment of the season from Luke Kornet by far, is the ice in his veins.
Hell yeah. Yeah, we're going to get to the personality stuff in a second. Yeah. Lee P in the chat saying Kornet alley-oop is underrated. The real Darrell. Yeah. Luke tends to play soft at times. Other than that, he's a really solid third-string center. In the words of Bobby Manning, he's our third center. Yeah. So personality stuff. Let me ask you this: best hang on the Celtics? Yes or no? He's got to be up there. He's
got to be up there. I think for me, it's probably between Luke and Hauser and Derek and Drew. That'd be my tier 1 hangs. I think I'm going with Hauser, just from the type of party I've seen from him in the midst of the championship celebration, the chundering in the cooler. You know, something that I can definitely relate to. As much as like Luke Kornet's like really like fun guy, I think that like he just is like a little, for me personally, just like slightly too much towards the meme scale. Just for like the if I'm actually going to be best friends with this guy, I think Hauser is probably more type of my guy, a little more relaxed from that perspective.
Yeah, Hauser, I get the impression you'd be like, let's go buy a case of beer and go find a court somewhere and just like put shots up and like finish this case together and bond. Whereas Luke Kornet, I feel like if you had like a 4-hour drive, I think Kornet is probably the better driving partner, co-pilot, if you will. I think he's going to get the aux cable and put on some good tunes. And I don't know, he sounds like he might chuck on some good comedy podcasts as well, have a couple of zingers, pedestrian watching as people are crossing the road in front of our stopped vehicle. Anyway, one could
definitely
dream,
some
right?
zingers.
Really, I just like to hang out with all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Boss One boys, like, they have to be. They got to bring that type of energy. That's their role.
Do you think his personality and its effect on the team chemistry is like underrated? Because like, can you really look down at all the teams across the league and say like everyone has that guy, like to the caliber of Luke Kornet, as far as like he clearly has a positive impact on the locker room, I think. And I don't think everyone has that. And once you tick off, can we have an All-NBA first-team player? Can we have multiple other All-Stars? Can we have DPOY candidates? Can we have, the best defensive backcourt in the league and, a trio of really good screen navigators? I'll lump Peyton Pritchard in there as part of that trio. Then you start to think, okay, what else is on the wish list? And like, can we just have a good hang, a good guy, lemon squares, memes? Like it's up there in the value rankings, I think.
Absolutely, dude. Like, I think your 10th through 15th men, you don't want to bring in guys that suck. And like, because like, what's the point of bringing in someone that's going to be a malcontent that's also not playing and providing value on the court? Yeah, where's the advanced metrics for vibes? That's what I want to know. Is like, what's the on-off splits, bench, locker room for the vibe guys? I'm torn, but like, how much is he really impacting it from a vibes perspective? Because like, this team's like had pretty excellent vibes for the entirety of the Jays era. There's really been 1 year alone, maybe 2 years where the vibes haven't been awesome. The Kyrie second year of Tatum's career, and then like the 20/21 season post the bubble, the Tristan Thompson era,
sure,
we'll call it. But that was bad vibes for a variety of reasons. But like this team has been pretty awesome. There was Malik Fitz before him. We have, obviously Blake Griffin before that. But I will say that ice in his veins game, his like vibes literally helped them win that game alone.
Yeah, man.
So like that's against the Pacers. It is 80-76. Luke Kornet goes to the free throw line. JB currently 4 for 8. JT 2 for 4, True Holiday 1 for 2, Horford 0 for 2, Kornet goes in 2 for 2 from the line, puts the Celtics up 82-76 with 47 seconds left in the third quarter. And he's literally in between the first and second free throw. As soon as he makes the first free throw, he takes like 3 steps towards the bench and like shakes his fist. He's like, yeah, let's go. And then does the ice in his veins thing.
Yes. And
then goes back to the line to shoot the second. This is in between free throws. Goes back to the free throw line and then knocks down the second, and the bench is just going nuts at the same time. And that helped steady the ship. Obviously, they're still up 6 at this time, and helped steady the ship. Celtics were able to knock down some more free throws later in that game. But like, that was a moment where the Celtics were up 11, lead was slipping away a little bit, and it was like, oh my God, are we going to lose a game? Because we're, ended the game 10 for 19 from the line, including Luke Kornet's made free throws. So that's like a vibe W. Like that goes straight in the W column.
Yeah, and so I put it to you and everyone here that he manufactures those magical moments off the court, behind the scenes all the time as well, which I think is an invaluable trait. But I don't know, I'm kind of running out of stuff here, Jake. What else about Luke Kornet is important to you?
What a great question. How does Luke Kornet help your day-to-day life? I feel he makes me feel comfortable. I think as a guy in the rotation, and I just don't think that's something that we could have said. I was always a little higher on Luke Kornet than you guys, which makes me happy. But he definitely leveled up this year. But I don't have too much more on Luke Kornet here. But he's gonna be important for the first half of the season with KP out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that bears a lot of truth. The Green Kornet, the Cornish Game Hen, cornhub.com. There's a lot going for him on and off the court. We're really going to need him to flourish in that expanded role going into next season. So we're excited to see what he can do. And certainly from what we've discussed, he's certainly capable. So we'll see how that goes. That's going to do it for this one. Jake, Wednesday night, we've got part 2 of our Rivals series. Do you want to tell the folks what's happening there?
This is a big one. We have the president of Bucks Twitter, Nathan Marzion, has agreed to come on the podcast next episode, so Wednesday Eastern Standard Time. This has been a long time in the making. So I think if you're online, if you're on Twitter, you are probably familiar with the eternal optimist, the painful optimism at times from Nathan Marzion, which we will be talking about with him. And so I'm excited. I think this will be good.
I'm excited too. I do have to go and delete some tweets before we get some FaceTime with our friend Nathan, but looking forward to that one. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Smash that like button. Shout out to all the audio podcast listeners. Thanks for tapping in. Jake, love your work, man. Until next time, go Celts.